Victoria's hand cracked across Claire's face like a thunderclap. The pregnant woman stumbled backward, 7 months of baby nearly hitting the marble floor. Her palm flew to her burning cheek. Her other arm wrapped around her belly. And 3 feet away, her own husband doubled over laughing. "Did you see her face?" Daniel howled. "Priceless. Absolutely priceless." Victoria smoothed her designer dress and smiled. "Told you she wouldn't fight back. Women like her never do." But neither of them saw the silver-haired man watching from the shadows. His $1,000 suit. His clenched fists. His eyes burning with cold fire. They'd just slapped the billionaire's daughter. They just didn't know it yet. "Drop your city below. I want to see how far this story travels." Victoria's palm connected with Claire's cheekbone so hard her vision went white. The sound ricocheted off marble walls. Claire's head snapped sideways. Her body twisted. For one horrible second, her pregnant belly lurched toward the floor. She caught herself, barely. Her hand slammed against a pillar for balance while the other arm wrapped protectively around 7 months of baby. "Oh my God!" Daniel's voice rang out across the lobby. "Did everyone see that? Did you see her face?" He was laughing, bent over shoulders, shaking, tears forming in his eyes, laughing like his wife hadn't just been assaulted 3 feet in front of him. "I told you!" Victoria pressed herself against Daniel's side, red lips curving upward. "Pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. Like a scared little mouse." Daniel wiped his eyes. "God, you're amazing. Have I told you that today?" "Only twice." Victoria kissed his cheek. "Tell me again." Claire's legs shook. Her cheek burned like someone had pressed a hot iron against her skin. Around her, the lobby had frozen coworkers mid-step, security guards staring a woman by the elevator, holding up her phone with the red recording light blinking steady. Everyone was watching. No one was helping. "Daniel," her voice came out cracked, broken. "Why would you—" "Don't." He held up his hand, still chuckling. "Don't start with the tears. It's exhausting. She hit me. You probably deserved it." Claire flinched like he'd struck her too. Victoria laughed, sharp, cruel, delighted. "See, even he knows. You've been dragging him down for years. Everyone can see it, except you." "That's not true." Claire looked at her husband, searching for something, anything of the man she'd married. "Daniel, tell her that's not true." Daniel's smile faded. His eyes went cold. "Isn't it?" The 2 words hit harder than Victoria's hand. 4 years, Claire." He stepped closer, and she instinctively stepped back. 4 years of you criticizing everything I do. 4 years of you acting like I'm not quite good enough. 4 years of that disappointed little sigh every time I come home. I never... You did. His finger jabbed toward her face. You just don't notice because you think you're so much better than me. You always have. I loved you. You tolerated me. Daniel's voice rose, drawing more eyes. There's a difference. Victoria wrapped herself around his arm. Baby, don't waste your energy. She's not worth it. She never was. You're right. Daniel looked at Claire like she was something stuck to his shoe. She never was. Claire's hand pressed against her belly. The baby kicked hard, insistent, like even her daughter knew something was wrong. Daniel, I'm carrying your child. Are you? He raised an eyebrow. Because honestly, at this point, I'm not sure of anything when it comes to you. The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. How dare you? Claire's voice shook. How dare you stand there with your mistress and accuse me of mistress? Victoria's laugh cut through her words. Honey, I'm not his mistress. I'm his future. You're just the mistake he's too polite to correct. We're married. Papers. Victoria waved dismissively. Papers can be fixed. What Daniel and I have, that's real. Daniel pulled Victoria closer, his hand sliding down her back. She's right, Claire. Whatever we had, if we ever had anything, it's over. It's been over for a long time. When? Claire heard herself ask. When did it end? Does it matter? Yes, it matters to me. Daniel sighed like she was being unreasonable. Fine. You want a date? How about the night you told me you were pregnant? The night you trapped me in this marriage with a baby I never asked for. Claire's chest caved in. You cried, she whispered. When I told you, you cried. You said you were happy. I was terrified. His voice held no emotion. I cried because I knew my life was over. I cried because I knew I'd never get out. I cried because I was 28 years old and I'd made a mistake I couldn't take back. Our baby is a mistake. This whole marriage is a mistake. Daniel gestured between them. Look at us, Claire. Look at what we've become. You're miserable. I'm miserable. The only difference is I found a way to be happy again. He looked at Victoria with an expression Claire hadn't seen on his face in months, maybe years. Tenderness. She makes me happy, Daniel said simply. You never did. Victoria smiled triumphantly. Hear that? She makes him happy. Something you were apparently incapable of. Claire wanted to scream. She wanted to hit something. She wanted to grab Daniel by the shoulders and shake him until he remembered who they used to be. Instead, she stood there, pregnant, humiliated, alone in a crowd of people who were all recording her worst moment. I gave up everything for you. Her voice was barely audible. Everything. What did you give up? Daniel scoffed. Your analyst job, your cramped apartment, your 10-year-old car. Please, what exactly did you sacrifice? If you only knew. The words sat on Claire's tongue, desperate to escape. 4 years of secrets, 4 years of hiding, 4 years of pretending to be ordinary so he could feel like he was enough. But she couldn't say it. Not here. Not like this. I sacrificed myself. Her hand pressed harder against her cheek, feeling the heat of Victoria's handprint. I made myself smaller so you could feel bigger. And you still weren't satisfied. Made yourself smaller. Daniel laughed. That's rich. You've been looking down your nose at me since our first date. Every suggestion was a criticism. Every compliment had a but attached. You wanted me to be someone else, Claire. Someone better. Someone worthy of you. That's not true. It's completely true. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell Victoria's perfume on his collar. You've always acted like you were doing me a favor, like being with me was some kind of charity work. Well, guess what? I don't need your charity anymore. Victoria beamed. No, you don't. You have me now. I have someone who actually appreciates me. Daniel's eyes never left Claire's face. Someone who makes me feel like a man instead of a project. I never made you feel like a project. You made me feel like nothing. His voice cracked slightly, showing something that might have been pain underneath all the cruelty. Every single day, Claire. Nothing I did was ever good enough. Nothing I earned was ever enough. Nothing I was could ever measure up to whatever impossible standard you kept in your head. Claire stared at him. This was how he saw their marriage. This was how he saw her. And suddenly she understood. She'd spent 4 years hiding her true identity so Daniel wouldn't feel inferior. 4 years driving a cheap car, wearing discount clothes, living in a modest apartment. 4 years pretending to be normal. And he'd felt inferior anyway. Not because of anything she did. Not because of any criticism or disappointment. But because the inadequacy lived inside him, a bottomless pit that no amount of her sacrifice could ever fill. You're right. Her voice came out surprisingly steady. I couldn't make you feel like enough, because you decided a long time ago that you weren't, and nothing I did was ever going to change that. Daniel's face flickered. Something surprise recognition crossed his features before disappearing beneath familiar contempt. Don't try to psychoanalyze me. I'm not. I'm just finally seeing clearly. Claire lowered her hand from her cheek. The burn had faded to a dull throb. You needed me to be less so you could feel like more. That's not love, Daniel. That's not partnership. That's just sad. Sad. Victoria's voice rose to a shriek. You're calling us sad. Look at yourself, pregnant, pathetic, standing there with a handprint on your face while your husband chooses someone else. You're the sad one, Claire. You're the one nobody wants. Victoria. The voice came from behind Claire, deep, commanding, cutting through Victoria's words like a blade through paper. Everyone froze. Claire didn't turn around. She didn't need to. But Daniel's face went white. His eyes widened. His mouth opened and closed with no sound coming out. I think, Edward Morrison said quietly, each word dropping like a stone into still water, that you've said quite enough. Victoria's head snapped toward the voice. Her expression cycled through confusion, recognition, and naked terror in the space of 2 seconds. Mr. Morrison. Daniel's voice came out as a whisper. Sir, this isn't what it looks like. Really. Edward stepped into Claire's peripheral vision. 6 feet of barely contained rage in a charcoal suit. Because it looks like your mistress just assaulted my daughter while you stood there laughing. The lobby went completely silent. Daniel made a sound like a wounded animal. Your daughter, Claire Morrison. Edward moved to stand beside her, his hand gentle on her shoulder. She's worked here for 4 years under her mother's maiden name. She wanted to build something on her own merit. She wanted to find someone who loved her for who she was, not what she was worth. He looked at Daniel with eyes like frozen steel. She found you instead. Victoria's legs buckled. She grabbed Daniel's arm to stay upright, but Daniel could barely stand himself. That's not possible, Victoria breathed. She's nobody. She drives a Toyota. She buys her clothes at Target. She's worth more than you could make in 100 lifetimes. Edward's voice was quiet, deadly. And you just struck her across the face in my building, in front of witnesses, on camera. I didn't know. Victoria's perfectly composed facade finally cracked. Tears streamed down her cheeks, cutting tracks through her makeup. Mr. Morrison, please, I swear I didn't know who she was. So you only assault women you think are powerless? Edward's question hung in the air. That's your defense. Victoria opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. Edward pulled out his phone. His thumb moved across the screen. This is Edward Morrison. I need police at Morrison Global Headquarters immediately. Main lobby. Aggravated assault on a pregnant woman. The attacker is still on scene. He paused. Yes, I'll make sure she doesn't leave. Victoria collapsed to her knees. Her designer dress pooled around her on the marble floor. Her carefully styled hair fell across her tear-streaked face. Please. Her voice was barely a whisper. Please, I have a sister. She's disabled. She needs me. I can't go to prison. I can't. You should have thought about that before you put your hands on my daughter. Daniel stood frozen, watching his mistress fall apart, watching his father-in-law make a phone call that would destroy everything, watching his entire life crumble around him in real time. Then he turned to Claire. I didn't know. His voice cracked. Claire, I swear I didn't know. If I'd known who you were, if you'd known who I was, you would have treated me better. Claire's response was quiet but devastating. That's exactly the problem, Daniel. That's not what I meant. Yes, it is. She touched her burning cheek. You would have been faithful to a billionaire's daughter. You wouldn't have laughed while someone hit a Morrison heir. You would have pretended to be a decent human being if you'd thought there might be consequences. I love you. No. Claire shook her head slowly. You loved feeling superior to me, and when you couldn't feel superior anymore, you found someone who would help you feel powerful again, even if that power came from hurting me. The sirens were audible now, faint, but growing closer. Victoria heard them too. Her sobbing intensified. She grabbed at Daniel's legs, clinging to him like a drowning woman clinging to driftwood. "Do something," she begged. "Daniel, please do something." But Daniel couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't tear his eyes away from the woman he'd married, the woman he'd cheated on, humiliated, abandoned, and finally seen clearly. She was magnificent. Standing there with her hand on her pregnant belly, her cheek red and swelling, her eyes dry and fierce, she wasn't the weak, passive woman he'd convinced himself she was. She was a survivor, a fighter, a Morrison, and he'd thrown her away for the woman currently sobbing on the floor. "Claire." His voice broke on her name. "I'm sorry. God. Claire, I'm so sorry. I didn't understand. I didn't see." "No." Claire's voice was exhausted. Final. "You didn't, and that's not something sorry can fix." Two police officers entered the lobby. The crowd parted for them like water around stones. Edward stepped forward to meet them, his voice calm and professional as he explained the situation. The assault, the witnesses, the footage. He pointed to Victoria still crumpled on the floor. He described Daniel's role, the laughter, the complicity. When the officers approached Victoria with handcuffs, she screamed, "This isn't fair. I barely touched her. She's standing right there. This is all because of who her father is. This is corruption. This is—" "Ma'am." The officer's voice cut through her hysteria. "You have the right to remain silent." Victoria kept screaming as they led her away about injustice, about setup, about how Claire had stolen everything from her. Her designer heels caught on the marble. Her expensive bag lay forgotten where it had fallen. Daniel watched her go with the expression of a man watching his own reflection shatter into 1,000 pieces. Then he turned to Claire one final time. "I did love you," he said quietly. "Maybe not the right way. Maybe not enough. But I did love you, Claire, in whatever broken way I was capable of." Claire looked at this man she'd built 4 years of her life around. This man she'd hidden herself for. This man she'd diminished herself to protect. "Goodbye, Daniel." Edward stepped between them, one hand still on Claire's shoulder. "Mr. Collins, you'll be hearing from my lawyers within the hour. Regarding the embezzlement, regarding the divorce, regarding everything you've taken from my daughter professionally and personally." "Embezzlement." Daniel's voice cracked. "I never—" 18 months of stolen credit, falsified reports, bonuses for work you didn't do. Edward smiled, cold, sharp, lethal. "We have every email, every document, every lie you told to make yourself look successful while my daughter did the actual work." Daniel's face went gray. "You're going to lose everything, Mr. Collins." Edward's voice dropped to a whisper only Daniel could hear. "Your job, your reputation, your freedom. Not because I'm cruel, but because men like you only understand consequences. And this is yours." Two security guards appeared at Daniel's elbows. "Mr. Collins." One of them spoke with professional detachment. "Please come with us." Daniel didn't resist. He didn't have any fight left. He let them guide him toward the exit, his legs moving automatically, his mind still trying to process how his entire world had collapsed in 15 minutes. At the door, he looked back one last time. Claire stood beside her father, one hand on her pregnant belly, her bruised cheek already darkening. She wasn't crying, she wasn't raging, she wasn't falling apart. She was just done. And somehow that was worse than anything else. The glass doors closed behind Daniel. The lobby slowly returned to life. Conversations resumed in hushed tones. People moved again, glancing at Claire with expressions ranging from sympathy to fascination to barely concealed curiosity. Let them look, let them talk. Let the whole building know what Daniel and Victoria had done. Claire placed both hands on her belly, feeling her daughter kick with fierce determination. 4 years of hiding. 4 years of pretending. 4 years of making herself smaller so a broken man could feel whole. That ended today. Edward's hand tightened on Claire's shoulder as the lobby slowly emptied around them. "We need to get you checked," he said quietly. The baby's fine." Claire touched her belly. "She's kicking. She's angry, but she's fine." "And you?" Claire looked at her father. Really looked at him for the first time since everything had fallen apart. His eyes were red-rimmed. His jaw was still clenched tight. This man who had built an empire from nothing, who had faced down hostile takeovers and market crashes without flinching, looked like he was barely holding himself together. "Dad," her voice softened. "I'm okay." "You're not okay." His voice cracked. "My daughter just got hit in the face while her husband laughed. You're not okay, Claire. And I'm not okay. And nothing about this is okay." "I know." 4 years. Edward's hand trembled slightly on her shoulder. 4 years you hid from me. 4 years you let that man make you feel small. 4 years I could have helped you, protected you, and instead, I watched from a distance because you asked me to. I needed to do it on my own. Did you?" His voice rose. "Did you need to drive that ridiculous car? Did you need to live in that tiny apartment? Did you need to pretend to be someone you're not, so a mediocre man could feel adequate?" "Yes." Claire's answer was simple. Absolute. "I needed to know if someone could love me. Just me, without the money, without the name, without any of it." "And what did you learn?" Claire was silent for a long moment. "I learned that some people can't love anyone," she finally said, "because they're too busy hating themselves." Edward closed his eyes. When he opened them again, some of the rage had drained away, replaced by something softer. Sadder. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you out of here." He guided her toward his private elevator, the one that went directly to the executive floor. The remaining employees parted for them like the Red Sea, no one daring to meet Claire's eyes. She didn't blame them. What do you say to a woman whose life just exploded in public? The elevator doors closed, and Claire finally let herself breathe. "How did you know?" she asked quietly. "How did you know to be there?" "I didn't." Edward pressed the button for his floor. "I was coming down for a meeting. Wrong place, right time." He paused. "Or maybe right place, right time. Depends on how you look at it." "Victoria would disagree." "Victoria can disagree from a jail cell." The elevator hummed upward. Claire leaned against the wall, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. "I should have told you," she whispered. "About Daniel. About the affair. About all of it." "Why didn't you?" "Because I thought I could fix it." Her laugh was hollow. "I thought if I just loved him harder, supported him better, gave him space to figure things out. You thought you could save him." "Yes." Edward turned to face her fully. "Claire, sweetheart. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. You can't fill a hole that someone else dug inside themselves. That's not love. That's just slow self-destruction. I know that now." "Do you?" The elevator doors opened onto the executive floor. Edward's assistant, Margaret, stood waiting with a glass of water and a first aid kit. "Ms. Morrison." Margaret's face was carefully neutral, but her eyes were kind. "I have Dr. Chen on standby. She can be here in 15 minutes. "Thank you, Margaret." Claire took the water gratefully. "But I'm fine. Really." "You're not fine," Edward and Margaret said simultaneously. Despite everything, Claire almost smiled. Edward guided her into his office, a massive corner space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. She'd been here 1,000 times as a child, spinning in his leather chair, drawing pictures at his conference table, falling asleep on his couch during late nights when her mother was traveling. This room had always felt like safety. Today, it felt like coming home after a very long war. Claire sank onto the couch. Edward sat beside her, keeping a careful distance, giving her space while still being close enough to reach. "Tell me," he said quietly. "Tell me everything. From the beginning." Claire stared at the water in her hands. The beginning. Where was the beginning? I met him at a coffee shop. She started slowly. 4 years ago. I'd just finished my MBA, and you'd offered me the VP position. Which you turned down. Which I turned down. Claire nodded. I told you I wanted to earn my own way. Build something that was mine. But that wasn't the whole truth. What was the whole truth? Claire set the water down on the coffee table. Her hands were steadier now, but her heart was racing. I was tired, Dad. Tired of people looking at me and seeing your money. Tired of wondering if every friendship was genuine or strategic. Tired of dating men who Googled my net worth before our second date. That's why you changed your name. That's why I changed everything. Claire leaned back against the couch cushions. New name, new apartment, new car, new wardrobe. I wanted to be invisible. I wanted to be normal. I wanted... Her voice caught. I wanted to know what it felt like to be loved by someone who had nothing to gain from loving me. Edward was quiet for a long moment. And Daniel? Daniel was charming. Claire closed her eyes, remembering. He was struggling behind on his rent, driving a car that barely ran, working 60 hours a week, trying to get noticed. He had this hunger in his eyes, this determination. He looked at the world like it was a mountain he was going to climb, no matter how many times it knocked him down. You admired that. I fell in love with it. Claire's voice dropped. Here was this man who had nothing, who came from nothing, and he was still fighting, still dreaming, still believing he could be something more. And he looked at me like I was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Did he know about your family? No. Claire shook her head. I told him my parents were dead, that I'd grown up middle class, that I was just another analyst trying to make it in the corporate world. She laughed bitterly. I was so convincing that sometimes I almost believed it myself. And he never suspected. Why would he? Claire opened her eyes. I drove a 10-year-old Toyota. I shopped at Target. I complained about bills and clipped coupons and pretended to stress about rent. I was the perfect struggling professional. You must have slipped sometimes, said something that didn't fit. A few times. Claire nodded. He'd catch me using a word that was too fancy or knowing something about wine that I shouldn't have known. Once I almost ordered in French at a restaurant before I caught myself. What did you do? I covered, made excuses, told him I'd read it somewhere or seen it in a movie. Claire's jaw tightened. He always believed me. Or maybe he just didn't care enough to dig deeper. Edward stood abruptly and walked to the window. His reflection stared back at him ghostly against the city skyline. When did things change? Claire thought about it. When had the love turned to resentment? When had Daniel's admiration curdled into contempt? Slowly, she finally said. It wasn't one thing. It was 1,000 small things. A comment here, a look there. He started criticizing my cooking, then my clothes, then the way I loaded the dishwasher. Classic pattern. I know that now, but at the time I thought I was the problem. I thought if I just tried harder, did better, was more of what he needed. You thought you could make yourself small enough to fit into his insecurity. Claire flinched. Yes. And when you got pregnant? The question hung in the air like smoke. That's when everything accelerated. Claire's hand moved to her belly. I thought he'd be happy. We'd talked about kids. He said he wanted them. But when I told him... She stopped, swallowed. His face, Dad. The look on his face. It wasn't joy. It was panic. Like I'd just told him he had a terminal disease. What did he say? He asked if I was sure. Then he asked if I'd considered my options. Claire's voice hardened. Then he asked if maybe this wasn't the right time. If maybe we should wait. If maybe we couldn't afford it. And what did you say? I told him we could afford it. I told him everything would be fine. Claire met her father's eyes in the window's reflection. And he looked at me like I was lying, like I was hiding something. He said if I was so confident about our finances, maybe I had money he didn't know about. Edward turned around. He suspected for about 5 seconds. Claire's laugh was hollow. I looked him right in the eyes and told him there was no secret money, that we were just careful with our budget, that we'd make it work like millions of other families make it work. You lied. I lied. Claire nodded. Because I saw the look in his eyes, Dad. He wasn't asking because he wanted the truth. He was asking because he wanted a reason to be angry, a reason to feel betrayed, a reason to stop trying. So you gave him a lie instead. I gave him the wife he wanted. Claire's voice cracked. The struggling wife, the worried wife, the wife who needed him to be the provider, the protector, the man of the house, even though I could have bought our entire apartment building with my trust fund. Edward walked back to the couch and sat down heavily beside her. When did the affair start? 6 months ago. Claire had done the math 1,000 times. 3 weeks after I told him about the baby. You knew. I suspected after the first month. I knew for certain after the second. Claire's hands curled into fists in her lap. I found the texts first. He'd deleted most of them, but he missed a few. They were from someone named V hearts and fire emojis, and messages about missing him. What did you do? Nothing. The word tasted like ash. I told myself it was innocent. A coworker being too friendly. An old friend reconnecting. Anything except what it obviously was. Why? Because I was pregnant. Claire's voice rose. Because I was 7 weeks along and terrified, and I couldn't face the possibility that my husband was already checking out. So I closed my eyes. I pretended not to see. I told myself that if I just kept being the perfect wife, he'd come back to me. But he didn't. He got worse. Claire stood abruptly, unable to sit still any longer. She paced to the window, then back to the window again. The late nights got later. The excuses got lazier. He stopped trying to hide the perfume on his collar. He stopped pretending to care about the pregnancy at all. Did you confront him? Once. Claire stopped pacing. 3 months ago, I asked him directly if he was seeing someone else. And he laughed. The memory still burned. He laughed and asked if I was really that insecure. He said the problem with our marriage was that I didn't trust him, that I was always looking for reasons to be suspicious, that maybe if I spent less time worrying about fictional affairs and more time being a real wife, he wouldn't have to work so late to avoid coming home. He gaslit you. He made me apologize. Claire's voice was barely a whisper. I asked him if he was cheating, and by the end of the conversation, I was apologizing for not trusting him enough. I actually apologized. Edward's jaw clenched so tight, Claire could see the muscle jumping. And Victoria, I finally saw them together a month ago. Claire returned to the couch, sitting on the edge, like she might need to flee at any moment. I was walking past the parking garage after work, late. Most people had gone home, and I saw them by her car. What were they doing? Kissing, laughing. He was holding her the way he used to hold me. Claire's voice went flat. She was wearing this red dress, and her hair was perfect, and she looked like everything I wasn't. Young, carefree, unburdened by pregnancy or marriage or any of it. What did you do? I hid. Shame colored Claire's cheeks. I ducked behind a pillar and watched my husband kiss another woman, and I didn't say a word. I just stood there like a coward while my heart broke. You're not a coward. I felt like one. Claire's eyes burned with unshed tears. I felt like the biggest coward in the world. And then I went home and made dinner and pretended nothing had happened. Daniel came home 2 hours later, smelling like her perfume, and I asked him how his day was. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was ashamed. The word exploded out of her. Because I was supposed to be Claire Morrison, the billionaire's daughter who had everything figured out. I was supposed to be smart and strong and capable. And instead I was this pathetic woman who couldn't even keep her husband interested. Claire. I know. She held up her hand. I know it wasn't my fault. I know he's the one who cheated. But that's not how it felt. It felt like I'd failed. Like I'd taken this beautiful thing, our marriage, our future, our family, and somehow broken it beyond repair. Edward reached out and took her hand. His grip was firm, warm grounding. You didn't break anything, he said quietly. You married a broken man who didn't have the courage to face his own damage. That's not your failure, that's his. Claire squeezed her father's hand. Tears finally spilled down her cheeks, hot, silent cleansing. I keep wondering, she whispered, if I'd told him the truth from the beginning. It wouldn't have mattered. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Edward's voice was certain. Because men like Daniel don't become different people when they find out their wives are wealthy. They just become better at hiding their resentment. The poison was always there, Claire. You just delayed when it surfaced. Maybe. Not maybe. Definitely. Edward stood and walked to his desk. He pulled out a folder and brought it back to the couch. I've been keeping track. Claire looked at the folder. What is that, Vim? Evidence. Edward sat down again. 18 months of falsified sales reports. Every time Daniel claimed credit for a deal you closed. Every bonus he received for work you did. Every lie he told to make himself look successful. You knew. I suspected. Edward's jaw tightened. I had someone look into it after you told me you were getting married. I wanted to make sure he wasn't marrying you for money. You investigated my husband. I investigated a stranger who wanted to marry my daughter. Edward's voice held no apology. And what I found was a man with massive student debt, a gambling problem he thought he'd hidden, and a pattern of taking credit for other people's work. Claire's stomach dropped. Gambling problem. Online poker. Sports betting. He lost about $40,000 in the 2 years before you met him. Edward flipped open the folder and handed her a sheet. He stopped after you got married. I assume because you were paying the bills and he no longer needed the fantasy of a big win. Claire stared at the numbers. $40,000. Money Daniel had never mentioned. Debt she'd never known about. Why didn't you tell me? Because you asked me not to interfere. Edward's voice was heavy with regret. You said you wanted to build your own life, make your own choices. You said if I couldn't respect that you'd never speak to me again. I was 24. You were an adult. Edward took the paper back. And you were right. You deserved the chance to live your own life, even if that life included mistakes. His voice cracked. I never thought the mistakes would hurt you this badly. Claire leaned into her father's shoulder. For a moment they sat in silence, two people grieving the death of something that had never really been alive. What happens now? Claire finally asked. Now? Edward's voice hardened. Now I burn him to the ground. Dad. No. He pulled back to look her in the eyes. I let you have your 4 years. I stayed in the shadows while you played at being normal. But that's over now. Daniel Collins assaulted my daughter. Victoria assaulted me. Daniel just watched, laughed, encouraged. Edward's words were clipped precise. In the eyes of the law that makes him complicit, and in my eyes it makes him responsible. What are you going to do? Everything. Edward stood and walked to his desk phone. He stole from my company. He'll be charged with embezzlement. He cheated on my daughter. The divorce will be swift and brutal. He stood by while she was attacked. That's going in every legal filing. I don't want revenge. This isn't revenge. Edward picked up the phone. This is consequences. There's a difference. Claire watched her father dial. His voice when he spoke was cold and professional. The voice of a man who had destroyed competitors, survived hostile takeovers, built an empire from nothing. Get me Harrison, Edward said. Yes now. Tell him it's about my daughter. A pause. Harrison, I need divorce papers drawn up immediately. Claire Morrison Collins. Grounds adultery, fraud, and complicity in assault. Another pause. Yes, I said complicity in assault. There's video footage. It'll be on every news site by morning. Claire closed her eyes. By morning. The video would be everywhere by morning. The whole world would see her humiliation. But somehow, that didn't hurt as much as she'd expected. Maybe because the worst had already happened. Maybe because there was nothing left to hide. I also need criminal charges prepared, Edward continued. Embezzlement. 18 months of falsified reports. I want everything documented and delivered to the DA's office by end of business tomorrow. He listened for a moment. I don't care if it's aggressive. I care if it's thorough. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. This man hurt my daughter. He laughed while she was hit. He's going to learn that actions have consequences. Make sure he learns it well. Edward hung up and turned back to Claire. It's done, he said quietly. Harrison's team will handle the legal side. You don't have to do anything except rest and take care of yourself. And the baby. And the baby. Edward's expression softened. My granddaughter. Have you picked a name yet? Claire's hand moved to her belly. The baby was still now calm after the storm. I was going to let Daniel help choose. Her voice was bitter. I was going to give him that. One more thing I was going to give him that he didn't deserve. You can still choose. I know. Claire looked up at her father. I was thinking about Mom's name. Elizabeth. Edward's eyes went bright with unshed tears. Elizabeth. He repeated it softly. Your mother would have loved that. Elizabeth Claire Morrison. Claire tested the name on her tongue. No Collins. She was never going to be a Collins. No. Edward sat down beside her again. She was always going to be a Morrison. Just like you. They sat together in silence as the afternoon light shifted across the office floor. Outside the windows, the city continued its endless motion cars and people, and life moving forward indifferent to the drama playing out in this corner room. Claire thought about the woman she'd been that morning. The woman who'd woken up next to a husband she was still trying to save. The woman who'd driven to work in her modest car wearing her modest clothes playing her modest role. That woman was gone. She'd died in the lobby somewhere between Victoria's slap and Daniel's laughter, and Claire wasn't sure yet who would rise in her place. But she knew one thing for certain: whoever that woman was, she wouldn't be small anymore. She wouldn't hide anymore. She wouldn't make herself less so anyone else could feel like more. Dad? Her voice was quiet. Yes. Thank you. Claire reached for his hand again. For waiting. For letting me make my own mistakes. And for being there when it all fell apart. Edward squeezed her fingers. That's what fathers do. He said simply. We wait. We watch. We hope we're wrong. And when we're not, we help pick up the pieces. Claire leaned her head against his shoulder and let herself be held. For the first time in 4 years, she didn't have to pretend to be anyone except exactly who she was, and somehow, despite everything that felt like freedom. The video hit the internet at 6:47 p.m. By 7:30, it had 2 million views. By midnight, it was trending in 12 countries. By morning, Claire Morrison's face was everywhere. The pregnant woman getting slapped, the husband laughing, the billionaire father emerging from the shadows like an avenging angel. Claire watched the numbers climb from her father's guest bedroom, her phone screen glowing in the darkness. The comments were brutal. Not to her, to Daniel and Victoria. Thousands of strangers calling them monsters, demanding justice, celebrating their downfall. She should have felt vindicated. Instead, she just felt hollow. A knock on the door made her look up. Come in. Edward entered carrying a mug of tea. He was still in his suit pants and dress shirt sleeves rolled up, looking more exhausted than she'd ever seen him. You should be sleeping, he said. So should you. He handed her the tea and sat on the edge of the bed. I've been on the phone with lawyers, the DA's office, PR consultants. And Victoria's being held without bail, flight risk. Her lawyer's already trying to negotiate a plea deal. Will you take it? That depends. Edward met her eyes. What do you want? Claire wrapped her hands around the warm mug. I don't know. This morning I wanted my husband to love me. Now I want... She stopped. I don't know what I want. You don't have to decide tonight. The world seems to have decided for me. Claire nodded toward her phone. 20 million views. Every news outlet in the country wants an interview. Someone leaked that I'm your daughter, and now there are reporters outside the building. I know. Edward's jaw tightened. I've got security handling it. How did they find out so fast? The internet is efficient at destroying people. He paused. And at lifting them up. You're not the villain here, Claire. The public sees that. The public sees a rich girl who got slapped and had her daddy fix everything. Is that what you think this is? Claire set the mug on the nightstand. Isn't it Victoria's in jail because of who I am? Daniel's going to lose everything because of who I am. If I were actually Claire Winter's mid-level analyst, none of this would have happened. If you were actually Claire Winters, you'd be dealing with this alone. No lawyers, no resources, no power. Edward's voice hardened. You'd be pregnant and abandoned trying to figure out how to afford a divorce while your husband moved on with his mistress. Is that what you wanted? No. Then stop apologizing for being who you are. He leaned forward. You didn't choose to be born into this family. You didn't choose to have money. But you did choose to use it responsibly. You chose to prove yourself. You chose to love someone without conditions. None of that is something to be ashamed of. Claire's eyes burned. I feel like I cheated somehow. Like I had a safety net the whole time and now I'm using it. Everyone should have a safety net. Edward stood and walked to the window. The fact that most people don't isn't a moral failing on your part. It's a failure of the system. Daniel would disagree. Daniel can disagree from a cell. Edward turned back to face her. Speaking of which, he's been calling. His lawyer reached out to Harrison this afternoon. Claire's stomach tightened. What does he want? What do you think? He wants to talk. Explain. Apologize. Edward's disgust was palpable. His lawyer used the word reconciliation 3 times. Reconciliation. Apparently, he's realized that being married to a billionaire's daughter has certain advantages he'd like to preserve. The bitterness in Claire's laugh surprised even her. Of course. Now that he knows who I am, suddenly he's sorry. Suddenly he wants to work things out. His lawyer mentioned community property, suggested that a divorce might be unnecessarily complicated given your family's holdings. He's threatening me. He's grasping at straws. Edward crossed his arms. Harrison shut him down immediately. Prenuptial agreement signed and witnessed assets clearly separated. Daniel gets nothing except what he brought into the marriage, which from what I can tell is about $40,000 in gambling debt and a collection of lies. Claire pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them, despite her pregnant belly, making it awkward. I want to see him. Edward went still. Excuse me. Daniel, I want to see him. Absolutely not. Dad. He stood there and laughed while you were assaulted. Edward's voice rose. He spent 4 years lying to you, cheating on you, stealing from you. And now you want to sit down and have a conversation. I want answers. What answers could he possibly give you that would matter? I need to understand. Claire met her father's eyes. I need to hear him say it. Not through lawyers, not through statements. I need to look him in the face and understand how someone could do what he did. You won't get closure from him. Men like Daniel don't offer closure. They offer more manipulation. Maybe. Claire's voice was steady. But I've spent 4 years wondering what I did wrong. Wondering why I wasn't enough. Wondering if I'd been different better. More maybe he would have loved me. You know that's not true. I know it in my head. She touched her chest. But in here I still feel like I failed. And I need to hear him admit that the failure was his, not mine. I need to hear him say the words. Edward was silent for a long moment. Then he sighed heavily. When? Tomorrow. Wherever he is. He's at his mother's house. The apartment's been seized as part of the investigation. His mother's house. Claire almost smiled. He always said she was dead. Said both his parents died when he was young. I guess that was another lie. One of many. Edward rubbed his temples. Fine. I'll arrange it, but I'm coming with you. No. Claire. This is something I need to do alone. She held up her hand before he could interrupt. You can have security outside. You can have lawyers on standby. But when I walk through that door, I need to be by myself. Why? Because I need him to see me. Claire's voice dropped. Not the billionaire's daughter. Not the woman with the powerful father. Just me. Claire. The woman he married and betrayed. I need him to look at me and answer for what he did, without hiding behind the power imbalance. Edward stared at her for a long moment. You're so much like your mother, he finally said. She never took the easy path either. Is that a yes? It's a reluctant yes. He walked to the door. Get some sleep. You'll need your strength tomorrow. Claire waited until he left, then picked up her phone again. The video had reached 30 million views. 30 million people had watched her worst moment. 30 million strangers had formed opinions about her life, her marriage, her choices. She scrolled through the comments, looking for something she wasn't sure what. Vindication, maybe. Or understanding. Or just proof that the world saw what she saw. Instead, she found a message from an unknown number. Claire, please. I need to talk to you. I know you have no reason to listen, but please, just give me 5 minutes. I can explain everything. I love you. I've always loved you. Daniel. Claire stared at the message. 3 hours ago, she would have believed him. 3 hours ago, some desperate part of her would have clung to those words like a lifeline. Now they just looked pathetic. She typed a response. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., your mother's house. The reply came instantly. Thank you so much. You won't regret this, I promise. Claire turned off her phone and placed it face down on the nightstand. She had a feeling she was going to regret it very much. The next afternoon, Claire stood outside a small house in a working-class neighborhood, 30 minutes from the city center. The house was neat, but tired white paint peeling slightly lawn, a little overgrown American flag hanging limply from a pole by the door. A blue sedan sat in the driveway. The curtains in the front window twitched. Claire's security detail waited in a black SUV at the curb. Her father had insisted on at least that much, and she hadn't argued. She walked up the path and knocked. The door opened immediately, like Daniel had been waiting just on the other side. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, stubble on his jaw, clothes wrinkled like he'd slept in them. He'd aged 10 years in 24 hours. Claire. His voice cracked on her name. You came. I said I would. I know, He ran a hand through his unwashed hair. I wasn't sure if you'd change your mind. After everything. After everything. Claire repeated the words flatly. You mean after your mistress hit me and you laughed about it? Daniel flinched. Can we not do this on the porch? My mother? I thought your mother was dead. The color drained from his face. I can explain. I'm sure you can. Claire stepped past him into the house. You've always been good at explaining. The interior was small but clean. Floral wallpaper. Doilies on the furniture. Pictures of Daniel at various ages covering every available surface. A woman sat in a wheelchair in the corner of the living room. She was maybe 70, with gray hair and sharp eyes that tracked Claire's entrance with obvious suspicion. So, you're her... the woman said. The rich one. Mom. Daniel's voice was strained. Please. Don't please me. The woman wheeled herself closer, examining Claire like a specimen under a microscope. My son calls me crying yesterday, tells me his life is over, tells me his wife's father is some kind of billionaire who's going to destroy him, and now she shows up here looking like she owns the place. I don't own this place. Claire's voice was calm. But I used to own the apartment your son and I shared, the car he drove, most of the food in our refrigerator. He just didn't know it. The woman's eyes narrowed. So you lied to him. I omitted certain truths. That's lying where I come from. Where I come from, it's called protecting yourself. Claire turned to Daniel. Is there somewhere private we can talk? Daniel glanced at his mother, then gestured toward a door off the kitchen. The garage. There's a space out there. Claire followed him through the kitchen and into a converted garage that served as a makeshift office. Cardboard boxes were stacked against the walls. A card table held a laptop and scattered papers. 2 folding chairs faced each other in the center of the space. Daniel closed the door and stood there looking lost. Sit, Claire said. He sat. She remained standing, using the height advantage intentionally. Let him look up at her for once. Talk. I don't know where to start. Start with the lies. Claire crossed her arms. The dead parents, the struggling background, the sob story you fed me on our second date. Daniel's head dropped. My father left when I was 12. Just walked out one day and never came back. My mother raised me alone. She worked 2 jobs, 3 sometimes. And you told me she was dead. I told you both my parents were dead because... He stopped, swallowed. Because I was ashamed. Ashamed of what? Having a mother who worked hard to provide for you. Ashamed of being poor. The words came out ragged. You don't understand, Claire. You've never been poor. You've never worn second-hand clothes to school and gotten mocked for it. You've never eaten cereal for dinner 3 nights in a row because that's all there was. You've never... You're right. Claire cut him off. I don't understand poverty, but I understand lies, and you built our entire relationship on them. I built our relationship on hope. Daniel looked up at her, his eyes wet. I met you, and you were so normal, so real. You drove a crappy car and lived in a regular apartment and complained about your boss like everyone else. And I thought, finally, here's someone I don't have to impress. Someone who will love me even though I'm nobody. I did love you. I know. His voice broke. I know you did. And that's what made it worse. Worse how? Daniel stood abruptly, pacing the small space like a caged animal. Because I could never figure out why. You were beautiful and smart and kind. You could have had anyone. But you chose me. And I kept waiting for you to realize you'd made a mistake. That's not love, Daniel. That's insecurity. I know that now. He spun to face her. I know I was broken. I know I sabotaged everything. But you have to understand, I really did love you. In the beginning. Before everything got so twisted. When did it get twisted? I don't know. Slowly. You'd make a suggestion about something, the apartment, my career, our future, and I'd hear criticism. You'd try to help me, and I'd feel patronized. You'd succeed at something, and I'd feel like a failure by comparison. I tried so hard not to outshine you. Claire's voice cracked. I hid who I was. I made myself smaller. I gave up everything so you could feel like a man. I know. And it still wasn't enough. No. Daniel's admission was barely audible. It still wasn't enough. Because the problem was never you, Claire. The problem was always me. Claire sank into one of the folding chairs. The baby kicked strong and insistent, like she was responding to her mother's racing heart. When did Victoria start? Daniel closed his eyes. 6 months ago, right after you told me about the baby. Why? Because I was terrified. He opened his eyes. Because being a father meant growing up and I didn't know how to grow up. Because you were creating life inside you and all I could create was failure. Victoria made me feel... Don't. Claire's voice was sharp. Don't tell me what she made you feel. I don't care. Daniel nodded slowly. Fair. Why did you laugh? The question hung in the air. The real question. The one Claire had come here to ask. In the lobby, she continued. When Victoria hit me, you didn't just stand there. You didn't just watch. You laughed. Like it was funny. Like I deserved it. Daniel's face crumpled. He sank to his knees on the concrete floor, head bowed, shoulders shaking. I don't know. That's not good enough. I know it's not. He looked up at her, tears streaming down his face. I've been asking myself the same question for 2 days. How could I laugh? How could I stand there and watch the woman I married, the woman carrying my child, get hit and laugh about it? You tell me. Because I'm a coward. The words ripped out of him. Because in that moment, I wanted you to hurt as much as I was hurting. Because I'd spent 4 years feeling inferior to you, and finally, I had something you didn't. I had someone who chose me over you. And watching you get knocked down made me feel tall for the first time in our entire marriage. Claire stared at him. This man. This broken, pathetic man. He'd built his entire sense of self on comparison. On competition. On someone else's failure, so he could feel like a success. And she'd loved him. She'd hidden herself for him. She'd diminished herself for him. For this. You destroyed our family, she said quietly. For a moment of feeling tall. Yes. You threw away everything we could have been, everything we could have built. Yes. And now you want forgiveness. Daniel's face contorted. I know I don't deserve it. I know I don't deserve anything from you. But Claire, please, the baby. Our daughter. I want to be part of her life. I want the chance to be better. To prove that I can... No. The word stopped him cold. No. You're not going to be part of her life. Claire's voice was steady, absolute. You're going to sign away your parental rights. You're going to pay back every cent you stole from my father's company, and then you're going to disappear. Claire, please. This isn't negotiable. She stood looking down at him, still kneeling on the floor. You asked why I came here. You wanted to explain, to apologize, to beg for another chance. She shook her head slowly. I came here to see you clearly. To look at you without love clouding my vision. And you know what I see? Daniel's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I see a small man who needed everyone around him to be smaller. I see a liar who couldn't handle anyone else's truth. I see a coward who laughed while his pregnant wife got hit because it made him feel powerful. Claire's voice dropped to a whisper, and I see the father of my child. Which is why I'm giving you a chance to walk away clean instead of letting my father destroy you completely. Walk away clean. Sign the papers, give up your rights, accept the payment plan for the embezzlement, and I'll tell my father to drop the criminal charges. Claire reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. It's all here. 20 years of payments. Manageable. Survivable. You can rebuild your life. Daniel took the folder with shaking hands. And if I don't sign, then my father buries you. Claire's voice held no emotion. Criminal prosecution, civil suits, every resource he has devoted to making sure you never work again, never recover, never have a moment's peace. That's not fair. Fair. Claire laughed, short, sharp, bitter. You want to talk about fair? It wasn't fair when you cheated on me. It wasn't fair when you lied to me for 4 years. It wasn't fair when you stood there laughing while your mistress hit me. She leaned closer. This is the most fair thing that's ever happened to you, Daniel. This is mercy. Take it. Daniel stared at the papers. His hands trembled. His breath came in ragged gasps. I did love you, he whispered. Whatever you believe, whatever I did wrong, I did love you. Maybe. Claire straightened. But you loved yourself more. And that was never going to be enough for a marriage, for a family, for a life. She turned and walked toward the door. Claire. His voice stopped her. What are you going to tell her, our daughter, when she asks about me? Claire didn't turn around. I'm going to tell her the truth, she said quietly. That her father was a broken man who didn't know how to love without destroying. That he made choices he couldn't take back. And that walking away was the kindest thing he ever did for her. She opened the door. The papers need to be signed by Friday. My lawyer will be in touch. She walked out without looking back. In the living room, Daniel's mother sat in her wheelchair watching with those sharp, suspicious eyes. You're taking everything from him, the old woman said. His wife, his child, his future. He took everything from himself. Claire met the woman's gaze without flinching. I'm just making it official. She walked out of the house down the path to the waiting SUV. The security guard opened the door for her, and she slid into the back seat. Where to, Ms. Morrison? Claire looked out the window at the small house with the peeling paint, at the life Daniel had hidden from her, at the truth he'd buried under years of lies. Home, she said. Take me home. As the SUV pulled away, she placed her hands on her belly and felt her daughter kick. Elizabeth Claire Morrison. A Morrison through and through. No Collins in her blood. No Collins in her future. Claire had come to this house looking for answers. She'd found something better. She'd found closure. The papers arrived at Edward's office Friday morning at 9:47 a.m. Claire was sitting across from her father when Margaret brought them in her hands, instinctively moving to her belly as the envelope landed on the desk. From Daniel Collins's attorney, Margaret said, signed and notarized. Edward opened the envelope and scanned the documents. His expression remained neutral, but Claire could see the tension in his shoulders slowly releasing. It's done, he said. Parental rights terminated. Payment plan accepted. He's agreed to everything. Claire let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. And the criminal charges? Dropped as of this morning. Edward set the papers down. He's free to go. Free to rebuild whatever's left of his life. That's more than Victoria got. Victoria made her choice when she put her hands on you. Edward's voice hardened. She's facing 18 months. Her lawyer tried to negotiate, but the judge wasn't sympathetic. Pregnant victim. Video evidence. Billionaire plaintiff. He shrugged. Some battles can't be won. Claire thought about Victoria, the woman who'd called her pathetic, the woman who'd smiled while she slapped her, the woman who'd believed she was winning. 18 months in a cell. Plenty of time to reconsider her choices. What about her sister? Claire asked. The disabled one she mentioned. Edward's expression softened slightly. I made arrangements. She's been moved to a better facility. Full care covered indefinitely. Victoria doesn't know. Victoria doesn't need to know. Edward leaned back in his chair. The sister is innocent. She shouldn't suffer for her family's mistakes. Claire studied her father. This man who could destroy companies with a phone call, who had just dismantled 2 lives without breaking a sweat, who had built an empire on ruthlessness and precision, and he was quietly taking care of a stranger because it was the right thing to do. You're a complicated man, Dad. I'm a father. He met her eyes. Everything I've done this week I did because someone hurt my daughter. If that makes me complicated, so be it. The intercom buzzed. Margaret's voice crackled through. Mr. Morrison, Detective Hernandez is here. He says it's about the ongoing investigation. Edward frowned. What ongoing investigation? Victoria's case is closed. He says it's not about Victoria. Claire and Edward exchanged glances. Send him in, Edward said. Detective Hernandez was a stocky man in his 50s with tired eyes and a rumpled suit. He carried a manila folder under one arm and moved with the deliberate pace of someone who had seen too much to be surprised by anything. "Mr. Morrison, Ms. Morrison." He nodded at each of them. "Thank you for seeing me." "What's this about, Detective?" Edward's voice was guarded. "I was told the assault case was resolved." "It is." Hernandez sat in the chair Edward gestured to. "This is about something else, something that came up during our investigation of Victoria Langston." Claire's stomach tightened. What kind of something? Hernandez opened his folder and spread several photographs across Edward's desk. Bank statements, wire transfers, documents covered in highlighted sections. "During our forensic analysis of Ms. Langston's finances, we discovered a pattern of payments. Regular deposits always in cash, always just under the reporting threshold." "Payments from whom?" Edward picked up one of the statements. "That's what we're trying to determine." Hernandez tapped one of the highlighted sections. "But we did trace several of the deposits back to a shell company. A company that, according to our records, has connections to Morrison Global Industries." The room went silent. "Are you suggesting someone at my company was paying Victoria?" Edward's voice was dangerously quiet. "I'm suggesting someone was paying her to do exactly what she did." Hernandez met Edward's gaze without flinching. "The assault on your daughter may not have been random. It may have been orchestrated." Claire felt the blood drain from her face. "Orchestrated by whom?" "That's what we're investigating." Hernandez gathered his photographs. "But I wanted you to be aware. If this was a targeted attack, there may be more to come." "Who would target my daughter?" "Someone with something to gain from her humiliation. Someone with access to your company's internal structure. Someone who knew that Ms. Morrison was working under an assumed name." Hernandez stood. "I'll be in touch as our investigation progresses. In the meantime, I'd recommend increased security." After he left, Claire and Edward sat in heavy silence. "Who knew?" Claire finally asked. "Who knew I was using Mom's maiden name?" "HR. A few senior executives. The security team." Edward's jaw was tight. "No one who would have reason to—" He stopped. His expression changed. "Unless." "Unless what?" Edward picked up his phone and dialed. "Margaret, get me the personnel file for Victoria Langston. I want to know who recommended her for her position." A pause. Then, "What do you mean the file is missing?" Claire watched her father's face transform from confusion to suspicion to cold, controlled fury. "Find it," he said. "Pull backup records. IT logs. Whatever it takes. I want that information within the hour." He hung up and turned to Claire. "Someone deleted Victoria's personnel file, sometime in the last 48 hours. "That's not possible. Don't you have backup systems?" "Multiple." Edward was already moving, pulling up his computer. "Which means whoever did this had administrative access. High-level access." Claire's mind raced. Victoria paid to attack her. Her file deleted. Someone inside the company orchestrating the whole thing. "Dad." Her voice was steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. "Who hates you enough to do this?" "The list isn't short." Edward's fingers flew across the keyboard. "But targeting you, using you to get to me, that narrows it down." "To whom?" Edward stopped typing. He sat back in his chair, his face suddenly gray. "To family." Claire's heart stopped. "What?" "Your Uncle Richard." Edward's voice was hollow. "My brother. He's been after my position on the board for years. He's challenged every decision I've made, questioned every strategy, and 6 months ago I cut him out of a major deal that cost him millions." "Uncle Richard." Claire shook her head. "He's always been kind to me. He came to my wedding. He sent flowers when I announced the pregnancy." "He sent flowers?" Edward's laugh was bitter. "Of course he did. Richard always plays the long game. Kindness is just another weapon in his arsenal." "You think he paid Victoria to attack me?" "I think Richard would burn down this entire company if it meant he could rule the ashes." Edward stood and walked to the window. And using you, the daughter I've protected the heir I've been grooming, that would be exactly his style. Maximum damage, plausible deniability, and if it worked a path to removing me from power. How would hurting me remove you from power? The board. Edward's reflection stared back at him from the glass. They've been nervous about my leadership for months. Profits are down. Competitors are gaining ground. And now there's a scandal my daughter attacked in our own lobby, her husband exposed as a fraud, our family's secrets splashed across every news site in the country. He turned to face her. If Richard can prove I'm distracted, that my judgment is compromised, that I'm using company resources for personal vendettas, he can push for a vote of no confidence. He can take everything. Edward's voice was flat. The company, the legacy, everything I've spent 40 years building. Claire stood, her legs unsteady but her resolve firm. Then we stop him. It's not that simple. Why not? Because I can't prove anything. Edward spread his hands. The shell company is buried under layers of offshore accounts. Victoria's file is gone, and Richard is smart enough to keep his hands clean. Then we find someone who isn't. Edward frowned. What do you mean, Victoria? Claire's mind was working now, piecing together possibilities. She's in jail. She's facing 18 months. And she knows who paid her. She won't talk. Her lawyer would never. Her lawyer isn't the one facing prison. Claire grabbed her purse. But Victoria is. And Victoria has a sister she loves more than anything. A sister who's currently being cared for by your foundation. Edward stared at her. You want to leverage the sister. I want to give Victoria a choice. Claire met her father's eyes. She can stay silent and spend 18 months away from the only family she has left. Or she can tell us everything and watch that sentence get reduced to time served. That's manipulative. That's survival. Claire headed for the door. Call the DA. Tell them I'm coming to visit. The county jail was cold and gray and smelled like industrial cleaner. Claire sat in a plastic chair, her pregnant belly pressed against the edge of a metal table, waiting for the guards to bring Victoria in. She'd had time to think during the drive. Time to prepare what she would say. Time to remember the woman who had slapped her, laughed at her, called her pathetic. But when Victoria shuffled through the door in her orange jumpsuit, Claire almost didn't recognize her. The perfectly styled hair was gone, pulled back in a greasy ponytail. The designer makeup was gone, revealing dark circles and blotchy skin. The confident smirk was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like defeat. Victoria sat down across from Claire without speaking. You look terrible, Claire said. Thanks. Victoria's voice was flat. Prison doesn't exactly have a spa. I'm not here to gloat. Then why are you here? Victoria finally met her eyes. To rub it in. To show me what I lost. To watch me suffer. To offer you a deal. Victoria laughed harsh, hollow. Nothing like the sharp, confident sound from the lobby. A deal? What could you possibly offer me that I would want? Your freedom. The laughter stopped. My lawyers spoke with the DA this morning, Claire continued. If you cooperate, if you tell us everything you know about who paid you to attack me, names, dates, amounts, everything, we can recommend a reduced sentence. Time served. You walk out of here today. Victoria stared at her. You're serious? Completely. And if I don't cooperate, then you serve your full sentence, 18 months, and your sister stays in the facility my father's foundation is paying for. Claire let that sink in. I'm not threatening to remove her care, but 18 months is a long time. A lot can change. Funding can shift. Priorities can change. It would be a shame if she had to be moved somewhere. Less comfortable. Victoria's face went pale. You wouldn't. I didn't think my husband would cheat on me with his coworker. Claire's voice was calm. I didn't think that coworker would slap me in a crowded lobby. I didn't think I'd spend 4 years hiding who I was just to be treated like garbage. She leaned forward. I've learned not to make assumptions about what people will or won't do. You're not the person I thought you were. No. Claire smiled grimly. I'm exactly the person you thought I was. You just didn't know it. Victoria was silent for a long moment. Her hands no longer manicured nails, bitten down to the quick, trembled slightly on the table. I didn't know who you were, she finally said. When I took the job, when I started the affair, I thought you were nobody. Who told you to do it? A man named Peterson, James Peterson. Victoria's voice dropped. He approached me about a year ago, said he represented someone who wanted to help me advance my career. All I had to do was get close to a specific employee, report back on her activities, her relationships, her weaknesses. And you didn't think that was suspicious. I thought it was corporate espionage. Victoria shrugged weakly. I figured some competitor wanted inside information on Morrison Global. I didn't care. The money was good. $10,000 a month deposited in cash. $10,000 a month to spy on me. To spy on Claire Winters. I didn't know you were Claire Morrison. Victoria's eyes flickered with something regret maybe, or just self-pity. Not until your father showed up in that lobby. When did the affair with Daniel start? 3 months after I started reporting. Victoria's hands clenched. Peterson told me to get closer. Said the client wanted more access, personal access, and Daniel was... She stopped. Daniel was easy, insecure, desperate for validation. All I had to do was smile at him, and he was mine. Claire's stomach churned. Did you love him? I thought I did. Victoria laughed bitterly. I thought he was going to leave you, and we'd be together. But he was never going to leave. He just wanted to have it all the wife at home and the excitement on the side. So you decided to force the issue. Peterson decided. Victoria met Claire's eyes. A week before the incident in the lobby, he contacted me. Said the client was ready to move forward. Said there was going to be a moment, a public moment, where I needed to confront you. Make a scene. Make it memorable. And hitting me. That was my idea. Victoria's voice cracked. I saw you walking across the lobby with your pregnant belly and your perfect composure, and I hated you. I hated that you had everything I wanted and didn't even seem to care. So when Peterson told me to make it memorable, I made it memorable. Who's the client? I don't know. Victoria. I'm telling you the truth. Victoria's voice rose. Peterson never told me. He just said it was someone high up, someone with a grudge, someone who wanted to see you destroyed. And Peterson, where can we find him? Victoria hesitated. Victoria, Claire's voice hardened. This is your chance. Your only chance. Where is James Peterson? He's dead. The word hung in the air. What? 2 days after the incident. Victoria's face was gray. They found him in his apartment. Apparent suicide. But I don't believe it. Not for a second. Claire sat back, her mind racing. Peterson dead. Victoria silenced. And somewhere, the person who had orchestrated all of this was watching, waiting, planning their next move. Is there anything else? Claire asked. Anything at all that could help us identify the client? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and took Claire's hand, a gesture so unexpected that Claire almost pulled away. I'm sorry, Victoria whispered. I know that doesn't mean anything. I know I destroyed your life. But I'm sorry. I thought I was just playing a game. I didn't know people would get hurt. People always get hurt when games are played. Claire pulled her hand back. That's why they're not games. She stood and walked to the door. Wait. Victoria's voice stopped her. There's one more thing. Something Peterson said once when he was drunk. He said the client had been planning this for years. Said they'd been waiting for the right moment, the right leverage. And he said... She swallowed. He said the baby was the trigger. That nothing was supposed to happen until you got pregnant. Claire's blood went cold. The baby... That's when the timeline accelerated. That's when Peterson started pushing me to make a move. Victoria's eyes were wet. Whoever's behind this, they didn't just want to hurt you. They wanted to hurt your child. They wanted to hurt your family's future. Claire stood frozen, her hands pressing against her belly, where Elizabeth kicked obliviously. Someone had targeted her baby, her daughter, the child she'd been preparing to bring into the world, and that someone was still out there. "Thank you, Victoria," Claire said quietly, "for telling me the truth. Will it help? I don't know." Claire reached for the door handle. "But it's a start." She walked out of the jail into the harsh afternoon sunlight, her security detail falling into step beside her. Her phone buzzed. A message from her father. "Richard just requested an emergency board meeting. Tomorrow morning. He's making his move." Claire typed back, "Then we make ours first." She climbed into the SUV and gave the driver an address, not her father's building, not her apartment, but a quiet cafe in a neighborhood nobody would expect Claire Morrison to frequent. Because if her uncle wanted a war, Claire was going to give him one. And she knew exactly where to start. The cafe was half empty when Claire walked in, just the way she'd planned. She spotted him immediately. Marcus Chen, her father's former chief of security, sitting in a corner booth with a cup of coffee going cold in front of him. He'd been fired 6 months ago, right around the time Uncle Richard started his campaign to destabilize the company. Now Claire was going to find out if that timing was coincidental. "Mr. Chen," she slid into the seat across from him. "Thank you for meeting me." Marcus looked up. His eyes, which had once been sharp and alert, now held the dull sheen of a man who'd been beaten down by circumstances. "Ms. Morrison." His voice was wary. "Your message said it was urgent." "It is." Claire folded her hands on the table. "I need to know why you were really fired." Marcus was silent for a long moment. "Your father didn't tell you. My father told me you violated protocol, compromised security measures. But I don't believe that." "Why not?" "Because you were the best security chief he ever had." Claire leaned forward. "Because you caught 3 corporate espionage attempts in your first year. Because my father trusted you with his life and mine. And then suddenly 6 months ago you were gone." Marcus picked up his coffee, took a sip, grimaced at the cold. "What do you want to know?" "I want to know what you found. Before you were fired. What did you discover that someone didn't want discovered?" The former security chief stared at her for a long time. Then slowly he reached into his jacket and pulled out a flash drive. "I've been waiting for someone to ask me that question," he said quietly. "For 6 months I've been waiting." He slid the drive across the table. "Everything's on there. Financial records, email traces, meeting logs. Everything I found before they shut me down." Claire picked up the drive. "What does it show?" "It shows that your uncle has been systematically undermining your father's position for 3 years. It shows he's been paying board members for their loyalty. It shows he's been feeding information to competitors. And it shows—" Marcus stopped. His jaw tightened. "What?" "It shows he hired someone named James Peterson 18 months ago to run a special project." Marcus met her eyes. "A project targeting you." Claire's hand closed around the flash drive. "Why didn't you tell my father?" "I tried." Marcus's voice was bitter. "I brought him the preliminary findings, told him we needed to investigate further. He said I was being paranoid, said Richard was family, said I was seeing conspiracies where none existed. And then you were fired." "A week later." Marcus nodded. "Officially for protocol violations. Unofficially because someone on the board, someone loyal to Richard, convinced your father I couldn't be trusted." Claire sat back processing everything. Her uncle, her father's own brother, orchestrating a years-long campaign to destroy him, using Claire, using her baby, using everything he could get his hands on. "Will you testify?" she asked. "If this goes to court?" I'll do whatever it takes. Marcus's eyes hardened. Richard Morrison tried to ruin my career. He's trying to destroy your family. And worst of all, he endangered a pregnant woman and her child. He shook his head. Some things you don't forgive. Claire stood tucking the flash drive into her purse. The board meeting is tomorrow morning, she said. Can you be there? Just tell me when and where. 8 a.m., Morrison Global Headquarters, main conference room. Claire met his eyes. Bring copies of everything. She walked out of the cafe and back to her waiting SUV. The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, her uncle would make his move, and Claire would make hers. She placed her hand on her belly and felt Elizabeth kick. Don't worry, she whispered. Mommy's going to protect you. No matter what it takes. The SUV pulled away from the curb, heading toward whatever came next. And Claire Morrison, no longer hiding, no longer diminished, no longer small, was ready for war. The boardroom was silent when Claire walked in at 7:58 a.m. 12 chairs surrounded the long mahogany table. 11 were already occupied, 10 board members, and her uncle Richard sitting at the head like he owned the place. Her father's chair at the opposite end remained empty. Every head turned when Claire entered. Ms. Morrison. Richard's voice was smooth, controlled, giving nothing away. This is a closed meeting. Board members only. I'm aware. Claire walked to the empty chair beside her father's place. I'm here as a shareholder representative. 23% of this company belongs to me through my trust. I have every right to be present. Richard's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went hard. Of course. We're just surprised to see you, given your condition. My condition is pregnancy, not disability. Claire sat down, her hands folded calmly on the table. And I wouldn't miss this meeting for anything. The door opened again. Edward walked in, followed by Marcus Chen and a woman Claire didn't recognize, tall, sharp-featured, carrying a leather briefcase. Sorry we're late. Edward moved to his chair, his expression unreadable. Traffic. Richard's composure flickered. His eyes went to Marcus, then back to Edward. What is he doing here? Chen was terminated 6 months ago. Mr. Chen is here as a witness. Edward sat down. And this is Barbara Hayes, former federal prosecutor, now our outside counsel for special matters. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Richard leaned back in his chair, still smiling, but the smile had grown strained. A witness. For what exactly? For the matter I'm about to present to this board. Edward opened a folder in front of him. A matter involving fraud, conspiracy, and attempted harm to a Morrison family member. This is ridiculous. Richard looked around the table, seeking support. We called this meeting to discuss Edward's leadership failures, the scandal that's dragged our company's name through the mud. Not some fabricated, it's not fabricated. Claire's voice cut through his protest. And you know it isn't. Richard turned to her, his mask slipping slightly. What exactly are you accusing me of? I'm not accusing you of anything. Not yet. Claire pulled out the flash drive Marcus had given her. I'm presenting evidence. Evidence that someone on this board has been working to undermine my father's position for 3 years. Evidence that someone hired a man named James Peterson to orchestrate a personal attack on me. Evidence that the assault in the lobby wasn't random, it was planned, paid for, and executed as part of a larger strategy. She set the flash drive on the table. The question isn't whether these things happened. They did. The question is whether this board wants to know who's responsible. The room exploded into murmurs. Board members glanced at each other, at Richard at the flash drive sitting innocently on the polished wood. This is absurd. Richard's voice rose above the noise. You're going to take the word of a disgraced security officer and a woman who's clearly under extreme emotional stress. Claire, you were assaulted. You're pregnant. No one would blame you for being paranoid, but I'm not paranoid. Claire's voice was steady as stone. I'm informed. There's a difference. Barbara Hayes stood and walked to the head of the table. If I may address the board. Richard opened his mouth to object, but Edward cut him off. Ms. Hayes has information directly relevant to this meeting. I suggest we hear her out. The other board members nodded curiosity, overcoming their discomfort. Barbara pulled a stack of documents from her briefcase and began passing them around the table. What you're receiving is a summary of financial transactions traced to a shell company called Apex Strategic Holdings. This company has no employees, no office, no legitimate business operations. What it does have is a pattern of payments totaling over $300,000 over the past 18 months. Payments to whom? One of the board members, an older woman named Patricia Sung, flipped through the documents. To James Peterson, a private investigator who was found dead in his apartment 4 days ago. To Victoria Langston, the woman who assaulted Claire Morrison, and to several other individuals whose roles are still being investigated. Barbara paused. What's significant is the source of Apex's funding. She pulled out one final document and placed it in the center of the table. Wire transfers totaling $700,000 originating from a personal account belonging to Richard Morrison. The room went completely silent. Richard's face had gone the color of old paper. His hands gripped the arms of his chair knuckles white. That's a lie. His voice was barely above a whisper. Those documents are fabricated. This is a setup. The documents are authentic. Marcus Chen spoke for the first time, his voice flat and professional. I traced them myself before I was terminated. I have the original bank records, the transaction logs, and sworn statements from 3 individuals who received payments through Apex. You were fired for incompetence. I was fired because I got too close to the truth. Marcus met Richard's eyes without flinching. You convinced Edward I couldn't be trusted. You manipulated him into removing the one person who could expose what you were doing. Richard turned to his brother. Edward, you can't possibly believe this. I'm your family, your blood. You're the man who paid someone to attack my pregnant daughter. Edward's voice was ice. Blood doesn't excuse that. I would never. Richard was sputtering now, his composure completely shattered. This is all circumstantial. Wire transfers don't prove intent. Anyone could have. We have a witness. Claire's voice cut through his protestations. Victoria Langston. She's already given a statement to the authorities. She identified James Peterson as her handler. She described the payments, the instructions, the timeline, and she confirmed that the assault was ordered to happen the moment I became pregnant. Richard's face twisted. That woman would say anything to reduce her sentence. She's a proven liar and manipulator. She's also the only person who can identify your voice. Claire leaned forward. Peterson is dead, but Victoria spoke to the client directly, once, on the phone, and she's prepared to testify that she recognized the voice. That's impossible. You called her 3 days before the assault. Claire's voice was relentless. You wanted to make sure everything was in place. You wanted to confirm that the plan was proceeding, and you made a mistake. You used your personal phone instead of the burner Peterson had given you. Barbara placed another document on the table. Phone records, showing a 6-minute call from Richard Morrison's cell phone to Victoria Langston's prepaid device, 3 days before the incident. Richard stared at the document. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. You've been planning this for years. Edward stood, his voice rising. You've been sabotaging my company, corrupting my board, and plotting to use my own daughter as a weapon against me. And for what? A seat at the head of this table. I built this company too. Richard's composure finally cracked completely. He slammed his hand on the table, rising to his feet. I was there from the beginning, Edward. I sacrificed just as much as you did. But you always had to be the one in charge. You always had to be the face, the name, the legacy. What about me? What about everything I contributed? You were compensated. Generously. Money isn't the same as power. Richard's face was red, veins bulging in his neck. Money isn't respect. Money isn't legacy. You got everything, Edward? The company, the reputation, the perfect daughter. His eyes swung to Claire, filled with venom. And I got nothing but scraps. So you decided to destroy what you couldn't have. Claire's voice was quiet, but carried across the room. You paid people to spy on me. You engineered an affair between my husband and another woman. You arranged for me to be assaulted in public while pregnant so you could use the scandal to remove my father from power. I did what I had to do. The admission hung in the air like poison. Richard seemed to realize what he'd said. His face went from red to white in the span of a heartbeat. I didn't mean... You just confessed. Patricia Sung's voice was hard. In front of the entire board, in front of a former federal prosecutor. Richard looked around the table. Every face was turned against him. The board members who had smiled at him agreed with him, promised him their support. All of them were staring at him with expressions ranging from disgust to horror. This isn't over. Richard's voice was desperate now. I have rights. I have lawyers. You can't just... Actually, we can. Barbara Hayes stepped forward. Richard Morrison, you're being removed from this board effective immediately pursuant to Article 7 of the company bylaws regarding gross misconduct. Additionally, you'll be facing criminal charges, including conspiracy fraud and being an accessory to assault. 2 security guards entered the boardroom, the same guards who had escorted Daniel out a week ago. Mr. Morrison. One of them gestured toward the door. Please come with us. Richard stood frozen, looking at his brother. Edward, please. We're family. Whatever you think I did, I know what you did. Edward's voice held no mercy. You targeted my daughter. You endangered my grandchild. You tried to destroy everything I've built. He shook his head slowly. We stopped being family the moment you made that choice. The guards took Richard's arms and began leading him out. At the door, Richard turned back one last time. His eyes found Claire. This isn't finished, he said. You think you've won, but I know I've won. Claire met his gaze without flinching. And you know what the difference is between us, Uncle Richard? You spent 3 years plotting to tear this family apart. I spent 3 years trying to build something real. You invested everything in destruction. I invested in love. She touched her belly. And love wins. Every time. Richard's face contorted with rage, but before he could respond, the guards pulled him through the door. It closed behind him with a soft click. The boardroom was silent for a long moment. Then Patricia Sung stood up. I move that Edward Morrison be formally reinstated as chairman of the board with full confidence and authority. Seconded. Another board member raised his hand. All in favor. 11 hands went up. The motion passes unanimously. Patricia looked at Edward with something like respect. Mr. Morrison, the board is yours. Edward nodded, but his eyes were on Claire. Actually, he said slowly, I have a proposal of my own. The board members looked at him with curiosity. I'm 63 years old. I've been running this company for 40 years, and recent events have reminded me that life is short and family is precious. He stood and walked to Claire's side. I'd like to propose that my daughter Claire Morrison be appointed as Executive Vice President with a clear path to succession as CEO within the next 5 years. Claire's breath caught. Dad, you've earned it. Edward's voice was firm. Not because you're my daughter, because you're the strongest person I know, because you survived 4 years of hiding and emerged stronger, because when everything fell apart, you didn't crumble, you fought back. He turned to the board. Claire Morrison has an MBA from Harvard, 4 years of frontline experience in this company, and the kind of integrity that money can't buy. She also has something I didn't have when I started, a clear vision of what this company should be. Not just profitable, but ethical. Not just successful, but meaningful. Patricia Sung smiled. I move that Claire Morrison be appointed Executive Vice President of Morrison Global Industries. Seconded. All in favor. 11 hands. Claire stared at the table full of raised hands, at her father's proud face, at the future unfolding before her. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Edward squeezed her shoulder. Say yes, and help me build something worth leaving behind. Claire looked around the room, at the board members who had just witnessed her uncle's downfall, at Marcus Chen, who had risked everything to tell the truth, at Barbara Hayes, who had laid out the case with surgical precision, and at her father, who had waited 4 years for her to come home. Yes, she said. I say yes. 3 weeks later, Claire stood in the lobby of Morrison Global Industries. The same lobby where Victoria had slapped her. The same marble floor where Daniel had laughed at her humiliation. The same space where her entire life had changed. But everything was different now. She was showing properly now, 8 months pregnant, her belly round and proud beneath a silk dress that cost more than her old Toyota. She walked without hiding, without shrinking, without pretending to be anyone other than exactly who she was. Claire Morrison, Executive Vice President, heir apparent to an empire, mother-to-be. Ms. Morrison? Her assistant fell into step beside her. Your 9 o'clock is waiting, and you have messages from legal about the Peterson investigation, HR about the new security protocols, and your father about Sunday dinner. Tell legal, I'll call them this afternoon. Tell HR to proceed with implementation, and tell my father yes to dinner, but only if he doesn't bring up baby names again. Her assistant smiled. He's suggested Elizabeth Margaret this time, after your mother and grandmother. Claire touched her belly. Elizabeth kicked in response. Tell him I'll consider it. She rode the elevator up to the executive floor, past the portraits of Morrison leaders, past the conference rooms where billion-dollar deals were made, to the corner office that now bore her name on the door. Claire Morrison, Executive Vice President. She still wasn't used to seeing it. Inside, the morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a space that was already becoming hers. Her mother's painting on one wall, her Harvard diploma on another. A small mobile of silver stars waiting to hang in a nursery. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. For a moment, her heart stuttered. But when she opened it, she felt nothing but calm. I signed everything. I'm leaving the state. I hope you and the baby have a good life. I'm sorry for everything. Daniel. Claire stared at the message for a long moment. Then she deleted it. Daniel Collins was gone. Victoria Langston was in prison. Richard Morrison was awaiting trial. And James Peterson was dead, his secrets buried with him. The people who had tried to destroy her had destroyed themselves instead. And Claire was still standing. Her office door opened. Edward walked in carrying 2 cups of tea. Thought you might need this. You know me too well. He handed her a cup and settled into one of the chairs across from her desk. How are you feeling? Tired, overwhelmed, terrified. Claire smiled slightly. Also excited, and grateful, and ready. Ready for what? Everything. Claire looked out the window at the city spread below her. The baby, the job, the future, all of it. Your mother would be proud. I know. Claire touched the diamond pendant around her neck. Her mother's necklace passed down the day Elizabeth Morrison died of cancer 6 years ago. I feel her sometimes, especially now, like she's watching over me. She is. Edward's voice was rough. She always is. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the morning light shift across the floor. I've been thinking, Claire finally said, about what happened, about all of it. And I spent 4 years pretending to be someone else because I was afraid of being hurt. She turned to face her father. I hid who I was because I thought that would protect me. But it didn't. The hiding didn't save me. It just delayed the inevitable. What's the inevitable? Pain. Claire's voice was steady. Pain is inevitable. Loss is inevitable. People will betray you and hurt you and let you down no matter how careful you are. She touched her belly. But that's not a reason to hide. That's a reason to live fully, to love boldly, to be exactly who you are even when it's scary. That's what your mother always said. I know. I didn't understand it until now. Edward stood and walked to her side. He put his hand over hers where it rested on her belly. Elizabeth would have loved you, he said quietly. Your daughter. She would have spoiled her rotten and taught her to be fierce and told her stories about all the Morrison women who came before. I'll tell her those stories. Claire's eyes were wet. I'll make sure she knows where she comes from, who she comes from. And who do you want her to be? Claire thought about the question. About Daniel, who had been broken by his own insecurity. About Victoria, who had destroyed her life for money and attention. About Richard, who had sacrificed family for power. About herself, before the lobby, before the slap, before everything changed. I want her to be brave, Claire said finally. I want her to know that strength isn't about never getting hurt, it's about getting up after you fall. I want her to understand that love isn't about making yourself small to make someone else feel big. And I want her to know that she's enough, exactly as she is, without hiding, without pretending, without ever shrinking to fit someone else's expectations. Edward squeezed her hand. Then teach her, show her, be the mother you wish you'd had, and the woman you've become. I will. Claire looked at her father, at this man who had built an empire and nearly lost everything, who had watched from the shadows, while she made her own mistakes, who had been there the moment she needed him most. Thank you, Dad. For what? For letting me fall, and for catching me when I did. Edward's eyes glistened. That's what fathers do. He kissed her forehead and headed for the door. At the threshold he turned back. Dinner Sunday, 7 o'clock, and I'm bringing baby name books whether you like it or not. Claire laughed. Fine, but if you suggest anything that starts with R, I'm leaving. Deal. He left, and Claire was alone in her corner office, her hand on her belly, her future spread out before her like an open book. A month ago, she had been Claire Winters, invisible, ordinary, afraid. Now she was Claire Morrison, powerful, visible, free. The slap in the lobby had been meant to destroy her. Instead, it had set her free. The laughter had been meant to humiliate her. Instead, it had shown her exactly who her husband really was. The conspiracy had been meant to tear her family apart. Instead, it had made them stronger than ever. Some people spend their whole lives hiding from pain, hiding from truth, hiding from themselves. Claire had done that for 4 years, but not anymore. She sat down at her desk, pulled up her first meeting notes, and got to work. Outside her window, the city hummed with 1,000,000 lives, 1,000,000 stories, 1,000,000 struggles and triumphs. And inside her belly, Elizabeth Claire Morrison kicked once, twice, 3 times, strong and insistent and ready. Ready to be born into a family that had survived everything. Ready to be raised by a mother who had learned that strength wasn't about never falling. Ready to carry on a legacy built not on money or power, but on something far more valuable. Truth, courage, love. The kind that doesn't hide. The kind that doesn't shrink. The kind that stands tall no matter what comes. That was the Morrison way. And Claire Morrison, mother executive survivor, was just getting started.